Thank you. Thank you so much for coming along.
Now become one of the most important seats in the whole country. Net zero would have to be the worst policy that I've ever seen. I'm of no illusion that coal is going to win this war.
At the Singleton Bowls Club in the heart of New South Wales coal country, the battle for votes is in full swing. For many here in the marginal seat of Hunter, the stakes could not be higher. They want to know, will they have jobs if coal-fired power comes to an end?
We have the best coal in the world here in the Hunter, and we need to make sure while people want to buy it, we supply it.
Labor's Dan Repicoli is fighting to hold the seat after its pro-coal MP, Joel Fitzgibbon, retired. His rival, Nationals candidate James Thompson, is running hard, arguing Labor's climate policy threatens coal jobs.
The Labor Party have abandoned our region. There are 14,000 families that rely on mining in the Hunter region and the businesses that it supports as well. So I back that industry.
The wild card is One Nation.
The targets that have been put in place by the major parties is going to be a very dark time for the Hunter.
One Nation won over 20% of the vote here last election. Now it's attacking the major parties over their net zero emissions target to combat climate change.
Net zero emissions means net zero jobs. People in our power sector, in our power stations, our coal-fired power stations, they are very concerned about their jobs.
One Nation is preferencing the Nationals ahead of Labor, ramping up pressure on the ALP candidate. Do you think the message, the fear message on jobs is cutting through? What are you hearing?
This government is definitely doing a fear campaign against Labor and against us in this seat.
A deluge of negative ads attacking Labor is flooding the Hunter, warning of job losses in coal mines and coal-fired power plants. But there's also a growing sense here that unstoppable change is coming. Coal has dominated in the Hunter for decades, but this election, climate change and clean energy cannot be ignored here. Nearly all the giant Hunter coal plants are likely to shut down within 8 years. Jobs are in jeopardy and new ones are needed to replace them.
The coal-fired generators are not making any money, and some are in more financial difficulties than others. And it's actually got worse as the price of coal's gone up because they're now losing even more money. And that's really the inexorable truth of it.
Against the backdrop of this election, a high-stakes corporate battle is underway that could see Australia largely exit coal-fired power faster than most politicians will admit.
Those plants are already unreliable, they are already very expensive, and they are not going to be open in 2045. Everybody is going to close these plants.
Billionaire Mike Cannon-Brookes is leading a shareholder revolt inside energy giant AGL.
Hope we can make this work.
He wants to stop a demerger plan by AGL's board to preserve its ageing coal plants in a split company. If Cannon-Brookes wins this fight, the Bayswater power plant in the Hunter and Loy Yang A in Victoria are on borrowed time.
AGL is currently the single largest contributor to carbon emissions in Australia. I'm Mike Cannon-Brookes, and today I represent the largest shareholder of AGL, but I need your help.
AGL has slammed Cannon-Brookes' campaign. CEO Graham Hunt told 7:30 AGL's demerger would allow it to accelerate cutting emissions while protecting the affordability and reliability of energy supply for Australians. But Cannon-Brookes is hoping AGL shareholders will back his vision when they vote next month.
We need a plan today for how to manage that next 7 or 8 year period. It is entirely possible to move beyond these plants, and it should be done to the benefit of shareholders and to create the best company that is possible on the far side of that.
Every existing fossil fuel power plant, let alone every planned one, is a potentially stranded asset from an investment perspective. And that's why switching as quickly as possible to renewable energy, to low carbon energy, is critical if we want to limit warming to 1.5 degrees.
Dr. Andy Reisinger is a leading member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. He worked on its latest grim report that warned deep emission cuts need to happen quickly to get to net zero by 2050 and limit dangerous climate change.
Our report found that global greenhouse gas emissions have continued to increase, and in fact we're at the highest level in human history during the last decade. The train to 1.5 is leaving the station right now and we're not on it. But the next train is leaving 5 minutes from now and we might want to go on that one.
Climate change is forcing the shift to renewable energy. Even in the Hunter, power companies and their workers are having to adapt or risk being redundant. In February, Origin Energy announced its Eraring coal plant, the biggest in the country, would shut down in 2025, 7 years earlier than expected.
For everybody in the control room, and it was a bit of disbelief there. It was a huge shock for the younger blokes that I work with, because they had geared up for 10 years' time of being able to have, if they bought houses. Two of the blokes I work with had recently bought houses.
Jim McKenzie is a plant operator and union member at Eraring. He's worked in power stations since he was a teenager.
BHP used to be over in this area here.
He understands the need to shift to clean energy, but he wants a transition where power workers have jobs, heavy industry can operate, and lights stay on.
We need to have that other energy there first before we shut down, because everyone wants the lights to be on. No government's going to want to see blackouts happening again. So there is a lot of work to happen between now and then.
In this election, all the major parties are promising net zero by 2050. The debate is over how we get there. The coalition is determined to move slowly, with emissions cut just 26 to 28% by 2030. Labor is promising a faster transition, a 43% emissions cut by 2030. The Greens want to go even faster to reach net zero by 2035. Most Teal independents also want to move quickly, with emissions cut by 50% or more by 2030.
Obviously, the major parties have slightly different policies on this, one being quite regressive, one being a little bit more proactive, but not anywhere near approaching the edge of what's possible or what could be.
To get the whole economy to net zero by 2050, around 80% of Australia's energy generation should be renewable by 2030. But this huge shift will need a lot more cooperation between Canberra, the states and the private sector to connect the new renewable energy with consumers.
We can entirely do it by 2030. If we put our minds to it, we can do this by 2030. Is it scientifically, technically and economically possible? Absolutely.
It could be possible. It's the time frame, I think, that's important. We have to get the transmission built and we have to make sure that we've got the reliable backup of batteries and pumped hydro and a bit more gas.
Labor has a policy, just like they did years ago when they had the carbon tax, which put electricity prices up. They're doing it again.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison argues if the states and Labor move too quickly on climate change and renewables, it will lead to higher energy bills.
Our climate change policy is about lowering energy prices. This government have had 22 different energy policies and haven't landed one of them.
Politicians are understandably nervous because household power bills are already rising. Wholesale electricity prices have more than doubled since the global energy crisis began.
And it's largely related to coal and gas prices going up internationally. The other reason, though, that they're going up is more homegrown, which is about 30% or so of our coal generators are offline, either being serviced normally or they've got outages.
Dr Kerry Schott led Australia's Energy Security Board until last year. She thinks the energy transition can happen without sending power prices skyrocketing.
If this is managed properly, bills should go down. And wind and solar are, of course, free for fuel, so their costs are less. And the cost of the extra transmission we need, which is the other large cost, is bringing billions of dollars of benefits.
Not often mentioned by the political leaders in this election is the cost of not acting on climate change. But it's weighing heavily on the minds of many after 3 years of extreme weather events, climaxing in this year's epic East Coast floods.
The prospect of not reducing global greenhouse gas emissions to net zero risks destroying livelihoods and ecosystems around the world. It is eminently feasible to achieve rapid changes in emissions if we work together, which means bringing workers and people with you to allow them to retrain, to actually find their place in a low-carbon society.
Every day, Hunter power worker Jim McKenzie sees the coal ships coming into Newcastle. But the coal age that defined his working life is changing rapidly. Whoever wins the election, his old power plant is shutting down. What matters is what replaces it.
I want to see a transition where the young people that I work with, they're the ones producing this green, clean power. And then the older people like myself, we'll shut down the old coal-fired power station. So we'll still always have the power there, but it'll just be a power that's better for everybody.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.